Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for our Inner Circle Legislative Briefing. Appreciate all of your time. My name is Michael Limo, and I'm our Senior Director of Legislative and External Affairs for the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. As you likely know, this year has already gotten off to a very active start in the legislature, so we are going to jump right in with some of the issues that we wanted to discuss with you all here today. The first one being the State of the State address that the governor gave last night. So last night, the governor gave her seventh State of the State address to the joint legislature and guests. And what she essentially focused on were these three major talking points or issue areas: lowering costs, creating jobs, and delivering results. I think generally the reaction that there wasn't a ton of detail within her plan under those three key areas. We are continuing to work to learn more on some of them. But one of the areas under lowering costs that the governor did talk about was looking at how do we look at our permitting system and our licensure within the state. Many of businesses and chamber members, and likely some that are on the call, are aware that the permitting system is broken in this state. It is extremely cumbersome to work through the many permits you may need for a construction project, or simply going through your, fairly routine environmental permits. And it can be a cost in and of itself, but certainly the time and the delays and the compliance requirements have led to those costs as well. And so the governor seems to have highlighted that. She's talking about an executive directive that she passed at the beginning of last year that instructed departments to look at their permitting and identify timelines if they're appropriate. Where there aren't timelines for a permit, is a timeline appropriate? And then also talking about doing away with maybe some overly burdensome permits that are simply not necessary anymore. And she gave some examples about having to have a permit to sell ginseng at a grocery store, or having to, a farmer having to lime, go through a permit with the MDAR to lime their fields. And so I think that's something that we support in spirit of. Again, I think we want to see more discussion and planning around what that process looks like. But certainly we know that there's bipartisan support for digging into that and exploring deeper. She also talked about something similar with licensure reform and looking at LARA and how there are opportunities for reciprocity or maybe other ways to help streamline licensure in the state. She also talked about some investments to support jobs and skills training. There was a pretty significant tone on, pointing out that young men need, in particular, opportunities and pathways for career training and skill gap building. There was also discussion around the Going Pro continued investment, which Chamber has traditionally supported, and it is a good and important tool in the toolbox for supporting our workforce. There was mention of roads, but it was more a call to talk about future work and collaboration with the Michigan legislature. We expect this to be a big component of the budget debate as that heats up. As some of you likely know, we saw the House Republicans and Speaker Matt Hall come out with a plan fairly early in the year that looked at getting to that $3.1 billion budget mark without tax or fee increases. It did look at a significant amount of reprioritization of several, buckets of dollars within the state budget. The governor responded a couple weeks later, but again, wasn't a super detailed plan, although it did involve talking about a potential increase to the corporate income tax. And the rumors that were going around were that the governor was fairly serious about having a CIT increase be a part of some kind of road deal. That is a complete non-starter for the Michigan Chamber. We don't believe that that's an appropriate funding mechanism to fund our roads. We believe that reprioritization is appropriate, and let's find efficiencies or find cost cutting where we can. And then when new revenue is necessary, it should be user-based and broad-based. And so the CIT simply doesn't hold merit on any of those components or pillars that the chamber strongly believes in. And so we have been voicing our opposition to any CIT increase to lawmakers. We have now seen legislation drop yesterday that would increase CIT to 8.5%. Again, with the idea being that this is for road funding, but again, a non-starter for us. We believe that beyond efficiencies within the state budget, you also need to look at regulatory barriers that will help reduce the cost of building our roads. And so that would involve looking at how we source aggregate material to build the base that is necessary for our roads and infrastructure. And so we know that throughout the state, permitting and siting for aggregate mining has been a extreme uphill battle for our road builders and aggregate miners. And so we think that common sense reform around that issue area can help also reduce the cost of building our roads. We believe that we're paying around 20% extra sourcing our aggregate material because of this regulatory barrier. So we're going to continue to be engaged in this discussion, continue to push back on any increase to CIT or other taxes that we don't feel are an appropriate way to fund our roads and infrastructure, and we'll be keeping you all updated as those plans and discussions unfold. With that, I am going to turn it over to Randy Gross to talk about the new House Oversight Committee.
Good morning, everyone. Randy Gross. I am Senior Director and Associate General Counsel here at the Chamber. I just came on board within the last couple of weeks, so a pleasure to meet everybody. Making the rounds, please reach out if you have any questions. New House Oversight Committee established by Speaker Hall has been a priority, looking at some accountability into state government. They had their first meeting this week. Organizational and to learn how audits and meet with the Auditor General. It's clearly going to be a very active committee. They're looking to dig in. They're already looking at things along permits and things that Mike has already touched on a little bit. The unique thing on this committee that is different than historic aspects of oversight committees is they've been granted subpoena power already. So we anticipate they're going to be very active and pulling in department heads. Chairman DeBoer is looking to get feedback from the outside community and business community related to these issues. They're going to be hosting a website at some point to look for information posted. But as we engage with the chairman, there was a survey that was sent out, and Wendy may have to help me on timeline, but maybe a month ago, to members looking for different areas that we could point out for the chairman and work with House members on potential oversight issues. So you'll see a link to that survey at the bottom. We would really encourage everybody, take some time, fill it out. We know people don't like to do open-ended surveys. It's harder to get responses, but it'll be really helpful in crafting the focus of this committee and moving forward. We can go to the next slide. I'll turn it over to Wendy first.
Okay, thank you. I have the pleasure to be able to close things out today. Wendy Block, Senior Vice President of Business Advocacy for the Michigan Chamber. Thank you all for being here, and thank you all for your elevated investment in the Michigan Chamber. We hope that these calls are helpful to you, but just wanted to close out with an update on earned sick time and minimum wage. I'm sure many of you have been watching this issue since July 31st, and which is the time where the Michigan Supreme Court came out with this monumental decision in this so-called adopt and amend case and put these two new sweeping laws into effect. As you probably know, the Michigan Chamber has really been working hard since that time to get legislative changes through the legislative process. And of course, the legislature did adopt those changes that we were seeking kind of in the final minutes of the final deadline and sent those bills to the governor's desk. So House Bills 4002 and Senate Bill 8 are now law. They were given an immediate effective date, so they are in effect as of today, as of Friday, actually. And, we're having conversations with Leo, and the word back is that they are going to be taking kind of a, we want to work with you and help you comply with the law sort of approach with businesses versus a penalty first approach. So that is good news, but we know that has created quite the scramble on the ground for many of your companies. As we went through that process, our goals, of course, were to address the ambiguities, the administrative challenges, and the unintended consequences of the Earned Sick Time Act, and then to make the minimum wage more manageable from a financial standpoint for Michigan bars and restaurants. So just top line things to know about ESTA. We do have a compliance webinar. I'll have a QR code in just a moment, but that will happen at noon today if your company wants to join, and is free for members. The top line things to know about ESTA is that number one, there are very few exemptions for employers or employees. So despite our best efforts to get a number of exemptions for, say, small businesses and for part-time and seasonal employees, those did not make it into the final bill as passed by the Senate. And that is unfortunate, but we hope that many of the other changes really are positive for your company. So small businesses are treated differently. Anyone who has 10 or less employees does not need to provide 72 hours. They only need to provide 40 hours annually. And small businesses also have more time to comply. They have until October 1 of this year to get in compliance. This idea of one PTO bank being able to combine your earned sick time with other banks of time is allowable under ESTA, and it does not create the same compliance issues as it once did in, say, ESTA 1.0, as I call it. Really gives employers more flexibility on that piece, and we hope that that language is viewed to be very helpful for your companies, because that's a big one we have been hearing about. Front loading is allowed, so employers can front load the 40 or 72 hours depending on who you are at the start of the year. But unfortunately, Leo has stepped in with some interpretation of the language and are saying that the 120-day wait period does not apply to businesses who are choosing this method. So that will be something maybe that you need to communicate back internally to your teams just to make sure that people are aware of that change. It is a little bit different than how we had been interpreting it. We continue to have conversations with Leo about that, but they're pretty dug in at this point. The new default for usage is 1 hour increments unless you choose a smaller limit. So this is a positive change. We do know it's not necessarily as good as some would have liked it to be, where some of you probably have half-day increments today, but it is better than the 1, 6, 15-minute increments under ESTA 1.0. A big win is the elimination of the private right of action, as well as the one big rebuttable presumption under the act. So this idea that employers are guilty before they even get started and that employees can go straight to court with a complaint is no longer. Notice can be 7 days if foreseeable. You can have a written policy for unforeseeable circumstances. We hope that is more workable. And then also no call, no shows can be dealt with under ESTA 2.0. And then finally, the rate of pay issue was dealt with. So employers only have to pay the normal hourly wage, the base wage, or the minimum wage, whichever is greater, but you don't have to count in commissions and tips and gratuities and bonuses, etc. So it is just truly that pay that the employer would normally be responsible for. That would be how you pay your ESTA time. Minimum wage is easier. The minimum wage now is $12.48 an hour as of February 21. It is going to $15 an hour by 2027. The date is going back to January 1 for those changes, beginning in 2026. And then there will be inflationary increases beginning in 2028, but the legislature did change the factor for that. So it will now be relying on the Midwest CPI rather than the urban CPI, which is a more favorable indicator for businesses to use. And then finally, the tipped minimum wage is staying at 38% of the full minimum wage for this coming year or this current year. And then from there, it will be increasing 2% a year until it hits 50% in 2031. That is the cap. Now, the 50% of what will be increasing annually. So there will be an increase for tipped employees as the minimum wage increases, but it will not go above 50%. In addition, the legislature added a fine for employers that fail to ensure that tipped employees receive the full minimum wage when you combine the tipped minimum wage with the full minimum wage. Before we move on, I just want to make sure that you all are aware of two kind of emerging issues as it relates to earned sick time and minimum wage. I too wish that we could just move on from this debate. I probably feel like many of you feel the same way. But two things. First of all, One Fair Wage, the group that was pushing for the minimum wage changes, is threatening to seek a referendum on the minimum wage changes. We don't know how serious they are about that, but they would need to circulate petitions to qualify for the ballot. That would then put the new law on pause until the voters could decide, and the voters could decide to repeal that new law. So it is a shortened window for them to do that, and it is quite costly. So we'll see if they're serious about that in the coming months. In addition, on earned sick time, Mothering Justice is represented by Mark Brewer, an attorney here in the Lansing area. And Mark has been threatening that they are going to challenge the legislature's changes on earned sick time under the Constitution, kind of embark on a new round of litigation about whether the legislature had the right to amend this time around. So kind of a adopt and amend 2.0 challenge, if you will. Again, not sure if they will have the funding to do that. If I'm Mothering Justice at a national level, I say Michigan has a pretty generous earned sick time law on the books. Why are we going to expend resources in Michigan when we could move on to the 30 some other states that don't have these laws? But again, not sure if logic like that will prevail or if we will see a challenge in the courts. So that will be something to keep an eye on, just as if that plays out and how it impacts what employers need to do moving forward. We are working on, could you go back a slide, please? We are working on updating our compliance toolkit for Michigan employers. We do have a number of things already there. We have a comparison of earned sick time 1.0 to 2.0 in a slide deck that would be very helpful to your teams. We have an FAQ document that we are using to combine the Leo FAQ with some of the things that our experts have put together. That is going to again be updated later today, but it is there on the website. We're just continuing to add to it, but we expect to have sample policies, employment policies that businesses can use, a sample notification letter, a number of legal resources, etc. The Leo FAQ, which also is here, has a lot of good information in it, and we are in regular contact with Leo because we've been getting hundreds upon hundreds of questions about this new law, and Leo has been helpful in terms of just providing advice via email and then also in their FAQ. And then finally, all employers need to have new labor laws posted in their work site on earned sick time and minimum wage. If you're interested in not just doing your own DIY sort of thing here, but really having a trusted poster partner, the Michigan Chamber does offer posters, and we included the link there as well. And then finally, on that compliance webinar for today, we have a webinar that we're doing with the Varnum Law Firm out of Grand Rapids. You can scan this QR code with your phone and sign up. It is free for members. And we would encourage you to share this with your team. And you can certainly find it, registration on our website as well, under our training and webinars tab, I think it's called. But if you see the word training, it's pretty easy to find from there and to navigate. But again, free for members, and will be full of good information, and also will be available on demand. Okay, so we're gonna get to questions. I did see a question about the slides and whether we would share them post-event, and the answer is yes. We will get those to all people who registered for today's event. Also, just want to give you a heads up that we are in the process of updating our key bills page. That's the kind of page where we track major pieces of legislation that we are engaged in, or would be if that bill were to move through the legislative process. So I would encourage you to check that out. We're in the process of putting House Bill 4144, the CIT increase bill, onto the Key Bills website. So that should be there later today, as well as some information about a new proposed advertising tax that I think probably is of interest to some of you on today's call. And, we're here to help you and to serve you. So if you have any questions after we end today's call of our team, please feel free to reach out to us by phone or by email. We are here as the chamber because of our members. And so we want to make sure we're doing good by you and always being very responsive and member focused as it relates to that. So I don't know if anybody else was tracking. It looks like there was a question about whether executive director, the governor plans to put executive directives into place. She mentioned she can do some of the things in her State of the State speech, but would need the legislature to work together to fulfill her full agenda. Mike or Randy, you want to jump in on that question?
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. And sorry for the delay there. I agree. The governor did mention that there was going to be some executive directive focused on refunding fees where permit timelines had lapsed. It sounds like she's going to also be kind of utilizing the executive directive that she had in place previously to call on departments, including Lara, to look at the licensure aspect as well. I believe there was other conversations around the executive directive focused on tuition-free paths for higher education, career and technical education, specifically for young men. So I believe that we're going to see some kind of executive directive on getting departments to look at solutions there as well. By and large, most of what she talked about would likely require bipartisan legislative action. But I don't know if Randy has anything to add to that.
No, I was just going to say the same thing. I mean, there's a number of easy things she can do, executive directives, some of the refunds, but even a bulk of that pieces are going to require legislation, and real meaningful changes is going to need to go through the legislature, and we're going to need some leaders there to help champion the things that we've been arguing for.
Okay, it doesn't look like we have any other questions in the chat box, but we appreciate your time. Thanks for tuning in. Feel free to reach out to us if we can be helpful, and hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.